Forspoken is a game that was originally released back in 2023, and to be totally honest, it was definitely high on my list of games I wanted to play that year. I did see a lot of negativity surrounding the game last year, especially with a lot of the collabs and ads the game had out, and I saw a lot of negativity towards the main character's attitude. The game does have an overall rating of 64% on Steam at the time of this recording, and even with all that, I wanted to give this game a try. I still thought the traversal and the concept was pretty cool, so I finally decided to throw the game into my PS5 and I aimed for the Platinum trophy. Let me start with saying that this game is actually pretty fun. I can see why, though it has a 60% overall rating. Forspoken is not a bad game, but it's also not a great game. I would honestly say this game is just okay. But in terms of going for the Platinum trophy, this was one of the most time-consuming and annoying ones I've done so far. There was really no difficulty when it came to getting the trophy, just the time it took. I am glad I gave this game a chance and played it. I'm not as glad as how much time I had to spend with it. But anyways, let's talk about Forspoken. Before we jump into it, there are going to be spoilers throughout the video, so if you ever plan on playing this game, probably skip over the story and DLC sections, but I will do my best to avoid spoilers in other sections. Also, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, comment, and subscribe. It really helps me out. Thanks for watching. The story starts off with you being introduced to Frey, who will be the main character of this game. Frey's originally from New York and she's constantly getting into trouble with the law. You actually find yourself starting off in a courtroom in front of a judge. Shortly after, you'll be running down the streets of New York trying to escape a group of people who are upset with you because you apparently cost them their last job. But you manage to make it home, where you're introduced to Frey's cat Homer, and eventually Frey falls asleep and wakes up and her apartment's being burned down by the group that was chasing her. After this, Frey gives Homer away, and it looks like she's actually going to be jumping off of a building, but that's when she notices a shining light from a building. She follows the light and finds a bracelet. This is when she's introduced to Cuff and teleported to Athia, a place torn to pieces by something called the Break. Unknown how the Break started, what we do know is at the very beginning of it, it began to turn people into zombies and animals into monsters, and very few living beings can survive within it. Frey is being chased by a dragon, and she's dropped off by that dragon into the town of Sapal, which seems like the capital of Athia. You'll learn that the Break began because the four Tantas began to lose their minds and were driven to madness. At the beginning, you're only looking for a way back to New York, but after a lot of death and destruction, you'll eventually be forced to face off against 3 of the 4 Tantas, and you'll be forced to defeat them in order to save Athia and stop the Break from spreading. After defeating them, you'll learn that Cuff is actually the main villain of the game. You'll be introduced to your mother, who is the 4th and most powerful Tanta, and who is actually the dragon who saved you at the beginning of the game. You'll learn that Cuff is actually a godlike being who actually attacked Athia previously, and when he was defeated by the Tantas, they each absorbed some power from him and made him into a Cuff. Cuff was actually the reason for each of the Tantas going mad, and he managed to get off of Tanta Cinta and follow Frey into the human world, where Cinta was trying to find a safe place for Frey originally. Eventually, you'll face off against Cuff with Tanta Cinta, the dragon, at your side, and you will defeat him at a tough cost. However, Frey will eventually become the Tanta that she was destined to be and continue to defend Athia for the remainder of her life. That's the overall story for Forspoken, and honestly, it isn't a bad story. If anything, I genuinely enjoyed the story. It was fun and enjoyable and really had me thrown for a loop. I felt attached to Frey and Cuff and liked watching them grow as friends at the beginning of the game. It was nice watching Frey grow as a character and becoming more mature, because I was not a big fan of her at the beginning, but the story was well put together and extremely well paced, and I do think it deserves a lot more recognition for the story itself. My only complaint is how the twist comes at the end of the game, and then 2 hours later the game finishes. But like I said, it's not a bad story. I personally really liked it. However, the game also does a phenomenal job at answering every single one of the questions that the player could have by the end of the game. I do think that this story deserves a chance, and that you would probably enjoy it for yourself. There is one DLC available for the game called Tanta We Trust, which occurs after the events of the main story. However, during the DLC, Frey found herself in someone else's body, a girl named Talia, who is actually one of the personal guards of Tanta Olas. You'll find yourself with the strange tattoo on your arm that one of the Reading generals placed and began calling Talia a vessel. Eventually, during your escape, you are rescued by Tanta Cinta, and you'll both be looking for a way to escape Visoria. Throughout the story, you'll find out that Talia is actually a bomb, and if she dies, she will explode and cause catastrophic damage to the land of Athia. So it was actually up to Cinta to grab her and take her somewhere far away and kill her, or at least that was their plan originally. Cinta and Talia decide to put a stop to the gigantic tree of offering that is plaguing Visoria. During the final fight with the Reading general, you'll learn that Talia has absorbed so much power that she is ready for the final event. After defeating the general, you'll learn that Cinta and Talia caused so much death that they actually fed the tree enough sacrifices, and after receiving the general's life, you'll experience how Cuff came to be and how he was born into existence again. You'll also find out that the story is being told to you by one of the Tantas of Reading. After learning this, the voice asks you to come to Reading to learn the truth. Unfortunately, this is where the DLC ends, and I also don't see a second game within the game's future or even more DLC. But overall, I thought the DLC was great. It really sets up and explains a lot of unanswered questions that you pick up during the story. Even though the story of the DLC is super short, short, it is well put together and tells the story very well. I do wish there was more to it or it lasted longer, but from the time I spent with it, I definitely think it deserves more recognition. The world of Athia consists of 4 different regions or zones. Now, I don't want to dive too deep into each one individually, but I do want to talk about each one of them. I'm going to be going in the order that the game will progress you through them, so start with Sepal. Sepal being the city or town that you end up in shortly after the interaction with the dragon. Now, this is the only place that has not been affected by the break, and the people are managing to survive. Within these people, there is an overwhelming dislike for the Tanta since they feel like they were the ones who have brought this upon the world. You will end up spending quite a bit of time here within Sepal, going back and forth with wanting to protect the people's Athia or just straight up leaving. You'll soon after get attacked by Tanta Sila, and she will kill a bunch of people in Sepal looking for you. After this, you'll leave for Praenos, which is controlled by Tanta Sila. Praenos is one giant rocky mountainous desert. It has a very depressing atmosphere too, which honestly fits perfectly for how the game started out. After defeating Tanta Sila, you'll travel to Aviolet, the home of Tanta Prav. I'm not even sure if I said that one right. This was a whole different experience. You go from a desolate desert with no sign of life to a nice pretty forest region with plenty of trees and bodies of water. And the last 2 regions are Visoria and Janoon. Neither really have anything special to them. They're kind of similar to Aviolet with a ton of trees and grassland. Visoria has more of an open field aspect to it, where Janoon does possess more mountains. Overall, I thought the world itself was well done, although there's not a ton to it in the aspect of life outside of Sepal other than monsters and the abandoned forts and towns. So I mean, the world does go with the vibe of an abandoned world, but I do wish there was more to it. For example, there was so many ruins and forts that were just abandoned, no enemies at all, or even just individuals who survived the break. The developers have 2 characters throughout the game who survived the break and managed to live within it. The guy who runs the curiosity shop and Bob at the beginning of the game both survived within the break. So why can't there be more? Or just a group of them living in an abandoned fort? I just feel like you could have done something small like that to add more life to the game. But other than that, I did enjoy the feel of the world. The combat for this game is pretty fun at first. Eventually I did find it getting old and repetitive. Anyways, you have access to 4 different magic trees to use during combat, which consist of phrase magic, Silas, Pravs, and Olases. Each one will be unlocked as you progress throughout the main story. Every enemy within the game has weaknesses to either 1 or 2 of these different types of magic. Now in the beginning the combat can be fun, but honestly towards the middle and end of the game, I honestly found myself not bothering with attack skills, and I was just spamming the basic attack. I felt like it took way too long for me to charge up one of my skills from level 1 to level 3. I felt like I could dish out way more damage just by spamming the basic attack. However, each skill tree has access to 3 different attack skills and multiple different support skills, which can range from another attack or buff to fray. Lastly, you will have access to surge magic, which is essentially utilizing both attack and support magic to perform a special attack, or basically an ultimate move. Each skill tree has 1 type of surge magic, and most of them are pretty good. Other than that, you can use parkour during combat to dodge attacks and help dish out more damage. But again, I found myself just spamming the basic attack way more towards the end, because even when you dodge, you can't charge up an attack skill. You kind of just throw up basic attacks anyways. So I just thought, what was the point in wasting time in DPS on charging when I can just spam basics and get as much damage out as possible? The combat does have a rating system that will go with you from battle to battle. The more damage and dodging you perform, the better the rating will be. Honestly, I suck, and I never got past a C rating because I just tanked through the damage a majority of the fights throughout the game, but the better the rating you get, the more experience you can earn at the end of a fight. Traversal within this game is one of the big selling points for it, and I gotta say, it's pretty fun. It's super simple. It's a super fast run with some parkour aspects to it. You're able to traverse and climb mountains. You can use a zip line to pull yourself to higher areas and use it to zip off crystals that are throughout the world. You have a few different traversal skills that add so much to the game. You have a jump called Shimmy, which can speed you up significantly, as well as a speed boost from Silas Tree, the zip line, as well as a float skill to help you stay airborne. Yet with these limited skills, you can do so much with them. Honestly, what I enjoyed the most about the traversal is being able to find your own path that really wasn't intended to be the right way, but you have that ability to do whatever you want with those skills, because of those skills. It makes it a way better experience because you're not forced to play the game one way. You can play it however you want. During the main story of the game, you will have a ton of interactions between Frey and her Cuff, and it isn't all good. From the very beginning, the relationship between the two is just more or less being stuck with someone else, and at the beginning of the story, they are not enemies. However, as you continue to play the game and you can see how Frey's character matures and develops, and the relationship between the two continues to improve as they continue to take on the different Tantas. However, towards the end of the game and after the big betrayal, Frey's character kind of reverts to the beginning until her mother's spirit shows up and shows her the truth, and you decide to fight for Athia and become the last Tanta. In the end, when you manage to get Cuff back, and even after the betrayal, Cuff and Frey are still friends, and they just act like nothing ever happened. There is no dismay or disgruntled feelings between the two characters. Honestly, it bothers me a little bit since Frey doesn't have any issues. She just views Cuff as her partner. I feel like there should have been more of a rift between the two characters or some sort of negativity. I mean, after all, Frey learns Cuff is the reason for her mother and the other Tantas for going crazy. But anyways, Frey's character development really impressed me the most. I won't lie, I really didn't like Frey's character at the beginning. I have nothing wrong with cussing. I honestly am not the best when it comes to not doing it, but at some point it becomes very annoying when every other word is an F-bomb because it isn't necessary to get your point across. But towards the end of the game, it is very seldom for her to drop any of those words, but when she does it, the context definitely warrants it. Plus, I enjoyed watching Frey's character go from being one of the most selfish individuals to wanting to fight for the entire country. So I'm gonna be going over the enemies and the boss fights within the game. There really aren't any special factions or groups like that. Most of the enemies within the game are just zombies, which are humans who have been exposed to the break and have essentially lost their mind. There is a lot of wildlife within the game that was affected by the break and changed into monster animals. Next, there are soldiers and elite enemies that serve under most of the Tantas, and you will have to face off against them, which mostly show up in Sila's and Prav's territory. You will, however, have to face off against nightmares, which are essentially monsters that were born within the break storms. Each one of them still has a weakness to a type of affinity or magic that you possess. You will be facing off against the nightmares very frequently, since throughout the game the break is essentially getting worse and worse and more powerful. You will also find giant nightmares, which are essentially just giant damage sponges that will take time to fight since they have so much HP, but honestly none of them are crazy challenging. During the main story, you will have a few different boss fights, which typically will consist of you fighting off against one of the Tantas. These fights are pretty simple. Each one of them has a weakness and you just need to exploit that weakness. Honestly, none of the boss fights with the Tantas really stood out to me and really wowed me. They were honestly just okay. But the game does also offer 4 different enemies called the Abominations, which are giant monsters that formed from the break and are just more big boss fights. The reason they are relevant is because they are pretty tough fights due to them having a load of HP, and there is an achievement for defeating them. You can find mini versions of the Abominations throughout the game in the locked labyrinths, which are just dungeons with mini bosses at the end of them, and none of those are really difficult either. Overall, the enemies within the game aren't crazy difficult or have a crazy ton of variety to them. I mean, once you see them all, you will have literally seen them all. Occasionally you'll get a notification that you defeated a new enemy, but honestly they all look the same to me. The boss fights do feel like they lack something. I mean, it feels more like I just spammed the same attack and healed through the damage if my dodges didn't work, and I eventually won. Throughout the game you will be unlocking different skill trees of magic to utilize and face off against enemies. Each tree has different support skills and attack skills, and also each one possesses a different surge magic. As you progress and level up, you will be collecting mana to eventually unlock all of the skills. You can either gain mana from events throughout the world that grant mana, or you can collect it from leveling, or you're just running around throughout the world and picking up mana that is on the ground. Past that, the leveling within the game really doesn't do anything. It is more for looks in my opinion. There is nothing that is locked behind the levels within the game. I honestly didn't see a point to even having it. There are 4 different skill trees that you will unlock as you play through the main story of the game, like I said before. You will start with Frey's magic automatically unlocked at the beginning of the game, and this is called purple magic. You will eventually unlock Tanta Sila, Prav, and Olas's magic and be able to wield their magic for your own. Now I could sit here and talk about each one of the skill trees, but honestly I don't see a point in doing that, so I'm just going to be giving you my experience with it and moving on to the upgrading after. Throughout the main story, I primarily focused on using Frey and Sila's magic since I thought it originally did the most damage for being the quickest, plus a majority of the enemies have a weakness to one of those too. Post game, I spent a lot of time with Olas's skill tree, and it was AoE heaven. You were able to take out so many enemies so quick with some of Olas's moves. Honestly, I wish I had tried to play with more variety during the main story, especially after unlocking Olas's skills. To be totally honest too, I think Prav's skills were hot garbage. It was just a weaker version of Sila and Olas's since it possessed a single target and AoE. It felt like it took way too long to charge up and didn't give you enough damage to feel like it was useful. I did use it when I was facing off against a boss that had a weakness to Prav's magic, but even with basic enemies, I didn't bother using Prav's magic at all. Upgrading the skills is where the game becomes a little more tedious, since there is an achievement that requires you to upgrade every single skill. But essentially the game gives you a challenge that you have to perform with that skill, whether it is defeating enemies, the number of times casted, or even damage done to enemies. But once that challenge was completed, you got a small boost to the skill itself. Some of them can be useful, but honestly it was more tedious to perform the challenge than the actual benefit you got from upgrading it. The equipment system for this game is super simple. You collect different cloaks and necklaces, change them out depending on what gives you the most benefits. You also have access to unlocking different nails that Frey can equip, which provide added bonuses to certain types of magic, or bonuses to either surge, support, or attack magic. Honestly, I played this game on normal difficulty and I did not change my equipment after like halfway through the game, and I did not notice any difference in the gameplay. I mean, like I didn't change my cloak, necklace, or nails at all. You are also able to craft different break shards, which allow you to paint different nails. I don't really find those extremely relevant, so I do not want to dive into them. Lastly, you can also upgrade most of the equipment within the game, but like I said about it before, I didn't change nor did I upgrade. Lastly, you can upgrade most most of the equipment within the game, but like I said before, I didn't change any of my equipment and neither did I upgrade it. I did some upgrades to help with some of the skill challenges, but past that I did not bother with it at all. It does not play a huge role in the gameplay, so I did not find it totally necessary to continue to mess with it. The level of difficulty for earning all of the achievements to get the platinum trophy and even get 100% with the DLC was dumb. The game is in no way difficult, but the amount of time I was forced to spend completing almost every single side objective was insane. When I say every single side objective, I mean it. You have to complete 50 different monuments, 100 points of interest, 20 flashbacks, 50 different photo spots. On top of that, you are also forced to unlock every single skill and upgrade every single skill. Don't forget, you also have to unlock 80% of the archive within this game to even get platinum. I mean, I spent well over 50 hours completing this game to get the platinum trophy. Now, I'm sure some of the hours over 50 was because I fell asleep playing the game due to the repetition, so I can't count all of it. But in level of difficulty, it really isn't difficult to get the platinum in this game. Like I said, it's just more time consuming than anything, especially since the majority of those achievements have to be completed after the main story. The retail price of the game on Steam is $69.99, and honestly, I don't think it's worth that price at all. Yes, the gameplay and traversal is super fun, but that is not enough to carry this game to that price tag. The main story is decent, but I was disappointed with how the big plot twist happens and 2 hours later the game decides to end. Like, there was no time to really accept what happened, you just end it. On top of that, there's no discourse between Cuff and Frey. I mean, we just act like everything is okay in the post game. The character development is good, but other than Frey's development, some of the other characters are boring and bland. The combat gets boring after time. Since you just spam the same skills over and over again, there is no need to over strategize. You can just end up button mashing. With only like a 14-hour main story at best, and then forcing the player to spend another 30 to 40 hours to 100% the game is absolutely insane. However, even with all of that, I do believe this game is worth playing if you can find it on sale or discount on a third party. I just don't think I can support someone buying this game brand new. Well, there's my review of Forspoken after receiving the platinum trophy. Thanks for watching. If you made it this far, don't forget to hit the like button. Comment down below if you've played this game and what you thought about it. Also, leave some suggestions on games that you want to see me review, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.